It all started with a mailbox. A simple, unassuming mailbox that stood at the end of my driveway, dutifully collecting letters, bills, and the occasional package. For years, it was just another part of the suburban landscape, blending into the background of neatly trimmed lawns, white picket fences, and the occasional barking dog. But that mailbox, my mailbox, would soon become the center of a war that would change the dynamics of our quiet neighborhood forever. My name is Emily Carter, and I've lived in the peaceful suburb of Willow Creek for the better part of a decade. Willow Creek is the kind of place where nothing exciting ever happens. It's the kind of place where people wave to each other from their porches, where kids ride their bikes until the streetlights come on, and where the biggest drama is usually about whose grass is growing too fast. Or at least, it used to be. That all changed when Margaret Hargrove moved in. Margaret wasn't just any neighbor. She was the neighbor. The kind of person who seemed to thrive on conflict, control, and chaos. From the moment she arrived, it was clear that Margaret had appointed herself the unofficial ruler of Willow Creek. She was the type of person who could spot a weed in your garden from 3 houses away, who would measure the height of your grass with a ruler, and who would file a complaint with the Homeowners Association, HOA, if your trash cans were left out 5 minutes too long. She was, in short, a nightmare. At first, I tried to ignore her. I figured she was just one of those people who needed to feel important, who needed to exert control over something, anything, to make up for whatever was lacking in her own life. But Margaret wasn't content with just being annoying. She was on a mission to make everyone's life miserable, and for some reason, I had become her favorite target. It started small. A passive-aggressive note about my recycling bins being improperly sorted. A complaint to the HOA about the excessive noise from my backyard barbecue, which had ended at 9:01 p.m., 1 minute past the neighborhood's noise curfew. Then came the more personal attacks. She would glare at me from across the street, her lips curled into a smug smirk, as if daring me to confront her. She would make snide comments about my car, my garden, even the way I dressed. It was as if she had decided that I was her nemesis, and she was determined to make me pay for some imaginary slight. But the real trouble began when she turned her attention to my mailbox. It started with a dent, a small, almost imperceptible dent in the side of the mailbox. At first, I thought it was just an accident. Maybe a delivery driver had misjudged the curb, or a kid on a bike had bumped into it. It was annoying, but it wasn't the end of the world. I straightened the post, smoothed out the dent as best I could, and went on with my day. But then it happened again, and again, and again. Each time, the damage was worse. What had started as a minor inconvenience quickly escalated into full-scale destruction. The wooden post was splintered, the metal box was bent and battered, and the door hung open like a gaping wound. It was clear that this wasn't an accident. Someone was deliberately targeting my mailbox, and I had a pretty good idea who that someone was. Margaret. I didn't have any concrete proof, of course. Margaret was too clever for that. She never left any fingerprints, never made any obvious threats. But I knew it was her. I could feel it in my gut. She had that look in her eye, the look of someone who was enjoying every moment of my frustration. Every time I replaced the mailbox, she would watch from her porch, sipping her tea with that infuriatingly smug expression on her face. She never said a word, but she didn't have to. Her silence was louder than any accusation. I tried to go through the proper channels. I reported the incidents to the HOA, but that was a dead end. Margaret had the HOA wrapped around her finger. She was on the board, after all, and she had a way of twisting the rules to suit her own agenda. I called the police, but without any evidence, there was nothing they could do. I even set up a cheap security camera, but somehow, Margaret always managed to avoid it. She was like a ghost, slipping in and out of the shadows, leaving destruction in her wake. By the 5th time I had to replace the mailbox, I was at my wit's end. I was tired of playing her game, tired of being the victim. I knew I had to do something, but I didn't know what. That's when I had an idea. A brilliant, devious, utterly satisfying idea. If Margaret wanted a war, she was about to get one. I spent the next few days researching. I wasn't just going to replace the mailbox this time. I was going to build something that could withstand anything Margaret or anyone else could throw at it. I wasn't just going to defend myself. I was going to strike back. I started by looking into reinforced mailboxes. Thicker steel, heavier bases, all kinds of indestructible claims. But none of them were good enough. They were designed to survive accidents, not deliberate attacks. Then I stumbled across something interesting. In rural areas, where mailboxes are constantly at risk of being hit by snowplows, reckless drivers, and even the occasional bear, homeowners had resorted to extreme solutions. Concrete reinforced posts, steel core structures, mailboxes designed to absorb the impact of a truck without so much as a dent. That's when it hit me. I wasn't just going to build a reinforced mailbox. I was going to build a fortress. I spent hours researching different materials, testing durability ratings, and watching physics simulations of impact resistance. I consulted legal guidelines to make sure my plan was airtight. I wasn't about to give Margaret any ammunition to turn this against me. By the time I was done, I had the blueprint for the ultimate mailbox defense system, the Margaret-proof fortress. The core of the structure was a solid steel pipe, thick enough that it would take a chainsaw to even scratch it. The foundation was over 200 pounds of reinforced concrete, buried deep in the ground. The mailbox itself was a work of art. From the outside, it looked completely normal, but inside, it was an armored tank. Steel plating, welded together like a miniature fortress, designed to redirect energy. Any car that hit it wouldn't just stop. It would feel like hitting a brick wall at full speed. I waited for the perfect moment to install it. I let a few days pass without replacing the mailbox, letting Margaret think she had one. Then, on a quiet afternoon when she was gone, I started building. I dug deep, far deeper than any normal mailbox post should go. I poured the concrete in layers, embedding the steel core post as I went. By the time it dried, that post was so solid that it would take an industrial vehicle to even budge it. The mailbox itself was the final touch. From the outside, it looked like any other mailbox on the street. But beneath that innocent exterior, it was a steel-clad, impact-destroying, legally unbreakable trap. I stepped back and admired my work. It was done. And now, all I had to do was wait. Margaret noticed right away when the mailbox was back. She came outside that very evening, standing on her porch, eyeing it like a hawk. I could feel her trying to figure it out. Was it just another ordinary mailbox, or was there something different about this one? She squinted, tilted her head, sipped her tea, and then she did something that told me everything I needed to know. She smirked, as if saying, "You really think that will last?" That's when I knew she was going to hit it. It wasn't a matter of if, it was a matter of when. I didn't have to wait long. A few nights later, I was sitting by the window, sipping my coffee, when I heard it. The low rumble of an engine, slow and deliberate. Not the casual sound of someone coming home late, but someone on a mission. Someone who didn't want to draw attention. I knew that engine. Margaret drove a mid-sized silver SUV, the kind of car that screamed, "I need to feel important." As the sound grew closer, I carefully stepped to the side of my window, just out of sight, watching. Her headlights flickered as she rolled up to my house, the beams dancing across my yard. Then she stopped, right in front of my mailbox. My heart pounded. Adrenaline rushed through me. I could already picture the look on her face, the sheer smugness she must have felt as she revved her engine ever so slightly. She had done this before. This wasn't new to her. In her mind, she had won every time. But this time, she was about to lose. There was a brief pause, a moment of hesitation, as if Margaret was reconsidering. But then she hit the gas hard. The SUV lurched forward, full speed, straight toward the mailbox. And then the sound hit me like a thunderclap. A sickening metallic crash shook the quiet street, followed immediately by a horrifyingly loud bang. The force of the impact echoed through the night, shattering the usual silence of suburbia. I didn't even need to look. I already knew what had happened. That steel-reinforced mailbox? It didn't budge. Not an inch. Margaret's car, on the other hand? Let's just say it didn't fare so well. There was a deep, gut-wrenching screech as her front bumper practically crumpled like paper. Her hood buckled inward, as if it had just kissed a brick wall at 40 miles per hour. A hiss of steam erupted from the crushed radiator, a low groan from the now-wounded beast that was once her precious SUV. I could only imagine the shock coursing through Margaret's veins at that moment. She had expected the mailbox to go down like the last time, to fold under the force of her attack. Instead, she had just totaled her own car on a mailbox. My mailbox. I bit down a grin, keeping my face unreadable as I casually opened my front door and stepped outside. The show wasn't over yet. Margaret sat in the driver's seat, motionless, her hands clutching the steering wheel in disbelief. The glow of her dashboard flickered erratically, her car now struggling to stay alive after its brutal collision with fate. She turned her head slowly, her face caught somewhere between horror and rage. I could see it in her eyes, the split second when reality hit her. She had lost. Not just lost, but spectacularly. I could barely contain my laughter as I strolled casually toward the wreckage, feigning concern. "Oh, wow," I said, my voice dripping with fake sympathy. Did you just hit my mailbox?" Margaret snapped. You set me up," she screeched, shoving her door open and stumbling out. The rage in her voice was almost comical. "This is illegal. You can't. You tricked me." I crossed my arms, raising a brow. "I tricked you." Her face turned an impossible shade of red. "Yes. You made it like this on purpose. I'm reporting you to the police. I'm reporting you to the HOA." She gestured wildly at her wrecked SUV, as if expecting me to somehow take responsibility for her own actions. I stepped forward, tilting my head. "Margaret, are you saying you deliberately hit my mailbox on purpose?" Her mouth opened, closed, opened again. I could see the exact moment when she realized what she had just admitted. Her face fell, and just like that, her fight was gone. A long, painful silence stretched between us. And then, a voice from the darkness. "Holy crap. What happened?" I turned just as another neighbor, Mike, stepped outside in his pajamas, blinking at the scene of destruction in front of him. Margaret took a sharp breath, whipping around. "Nothing. Mind your business." But it was too late. Mike wasn't the only one who had come outside. Porch lights flickered on, one by one, up and down the street. Curious eyes peered from windows. The whole neighborhood was waking up to Margaret's grand humiliation. A wrecked SUV, a pristine, untouched mailbox, and a fuming Margaret, now realizing that she had an audience. I couldn't have planned it better. The police arrived within minutes. Because here's the thing, no matter how Margaret tried to spin it, she was the one who had driven into my mailbox. She was the one who had committed vandalism, and she was the one who now had to explain to the cops why her car was wrapped around a solid steel post. She tried everything, denying, blaming, even throwing a fake tantrum about unfair mailbox structures. But the officers weren't buying it. In the end, Margaret was fined for reckless driving and property damage. Her insurance had to cover her totaled car because the mailbox was legal and within regulations. The HOA, finally realizing that Margaret was a liability and not a leader, backed off. And my mailbox? Still standing. Not a single scratch. That was the moment everything changed. The moment Margaret lost her power. The moment the entire neighborhood realized that Margaret wasn't invincible. She had tried to play dirty, but she had played herself instead. And I had just won the greatest suburban war ever fought. Over the next few weeks, the consequences rolled in like a storm. Margaret disappeared from HOA meetings. Nobody took her seriously anymore. How could they? The woman had wrecked her own car on a mailbox. The HOA distanced itself from her completely. Suddenly, all those ridiculous, nitpicky complaints she used to get enforced were gone. In fact, a few new, relaxed rules started coming in. No more petty fines. No more pointless regulations. Margaret had no car for weeks while she tried to figure out how to deal with her insurance denying her claim. She was stuck at home, forced to rely on rides from her husband, who, by the way, looked absolutely miserable every time I saw him. Her reputation was shattered. The woman who once had everyone walking on eggshells now had to endure smirks and knowing glances from every single neighbor who had witnessed her spectacular downfall. And me? I enjoyed every second of it. Because for once, the bully had lost. Weeks passed, then months. Not once did Margaret ever touch my mailbox again. She never even looked at it. Every time she walked by, she crossed to the other side of the street, like it was a memorial to her greatest failure. And in a way it was. A monument to justice. A symbol that no matter how many times someone tries to push you around, there's always a way to turn the tables. All it took was a little bit of planning, some steel-reinforced karma, and the right amount of determination. But the story didn't end there. Over time, the mailbox became a legend. It started with neighborhood whispers. I heard that mailbox totaled an SUV. No way, that's got to be exaggerated. Dude, I saw the wreckage. Margaret's car got absolutely demolished. Then it spread. A few weeks after Margaret's departure, I was outside watering my lawn when a group of teenagers walked by. I noticed them slow down, staring at my mailbox with an unusual amount of awe. One of them nudged his friend and whispered, "That's the one." I raised an eyebrow. "The one what?" They glanced at me, their faces somewhere between curiosity and disbelief. "The one that, wrecked that lady's car." I blinked. "How do you know about that?" The kid grinned. "Dude, everyone knows." That's when it hit me. This wasn't just a mailbox anymore. It was a legend. And the legend was growing. Over time, the stories evolved like a game of telephone. Each retelling made the mailbox seem even more invincible than before. "Bro, I heard it's made out of military-grade titanium." "Nah, man. My cousin told me it was built with leftover parts from a nuclear bunker. I read online that it's reinforced with concrete and steel." Okay, that one was actually true. Some guy said it could stop a truck going 80 miles per hour. Unconfirmed, but I wouldn't put it past the beast. Dude, what if it's like cursed? Like some kind of mailbox demon? At this point, we were getting ridiculous. It wasn't just local gossip, either. One day, a random YouTuber showed up, camera in hand, filming my mailbox like it was a historical monument. All right, guys, today we're standing in front of the legendary Margaret Slayer mailbox. The mailbox that took out an entire SUV. Smash that like button if you think it could stop a bulldozer. I watched from my porch, sipping my coffee, wondering how in the actual hell my mailbox had become an internet sensation. I thought the craze would die down. It didn't. At first, it was just neighbors and friends making jokes. Then came strangers. Random cars started slowing down in front of my house. Some people even stopped to take pictures. One guy, who I swear was a blogger or something, approached me while I was taking out the trash. "Excuse me, sir," he said, adjusting his glasses. "I run a blog on indestructible objects, and I was wondering if you'd be willing to do an interview about your mailbox." I blinked. "My what?" "Your mailbox," he said enthusiastically. "It's famous." That's when I knew this had gone too far. One night, around midnight, I was woken up by a loud metallic thud. My first thought, Margaret had returned from exile for round 2. I jumped out of bed, threw on a hoodie, and ran outside, only to find a group of teenagers standing in front of my mailbox. One of them was clutching his hand in pain. "What the hell is going on?" I demanded. The teens turned pale. One of them, the apparent ringleader, hesitated before admitting, "We were, testing the mailbox." I stared at him. He scratched his head. "Yeah, the mailbox challenge." Oh, my God. Apparently, some absolute genius on the internet had started a trend daring people to test the mailbox's strength by punching, kicking, or hitting it with objects. Spoiler alert, the mailbox won every single time. The kid holding his hand. He had punched it full force, probably expecting it to give way like a normal mailbox. Instead, he hit solid steel. It took 2 seconds for him to realize he had severely miscalculated. I sighed. "Let me guess. You thought you could break it." The teen nodded painfully. "Well," I shrugged, "at least you're smarter than Margaret. She used a whole car." At this point, the mailbox was unstoppable. No one dared mess with it. No HOA member questioned it. It became the heart of the neighborhood, a monument to pettiness, revenge, and ultimate victory. And honestly, I was totally okay with that. Margaret had tried to make my life miserable. She had played every dirty trick she could. But in the end, a simple mailbox had defeated her. A mailbox that stood strong while she fell apart. And while I couldn't say for sure if Margaret had moved far away to escape the humiliation, I'd like to imagine that somewhere out there, she still has nightmares about that mailbox. Because even the biggest bullies can be taken down. Sometimes, all it takes is a little steel, some concrete, and the right amount of karma. But here's the thing. Ever since Margaret left, the neighborhood has been peaceful. No more HOA tyranny. No more petty complaints. No more chaos. But recently, a new family moved into Margaret's old house. And I've seen the new neighbor watching my mailbox. Not in fear. Not in awe. But with curiosity. I don't want to jump to conclusions. But if history has taught me anything, if there's another Margaret in town, well, let's just say the mailbox is ready. The story of the mailbox isn't over. It's a living legend, a symbol of resilience, and a reminder that sometimes the quietest things can make the loudest impact. Whether it's standing up to a bully, defending your home, or simply refusing to back down, The mailbox is a testament to the power of determination. And as for me, I'll be here, sipping my coffee, watching the neighborhood, and waiting to see what happens next. Because in Willow Creek, you never know when the next chapter of the Mailbox Chronicles will begin. Thank you for taking the time to listen to today's story on Store of Good Stories. If this story touched your heart or made you think, don't forget to hit like and share the video to spread this positive message to more people. And if this is your first time here, make sure to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss any of the meaningful stories we share every week. Your support is the biggest motivation for Store of Good Stories to keep bringing heartfelt and valuable stories to you. See you in the next video.